Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Heidi. Heidi writes, Dear Ken, you are to attachment theory as Dr. Ramani is to narcissistic behavior. Thank you for being such a valuable resource. Firstly, can I just say that is a huge compliment since I was very inspired by Dr. Ramani's work on narcissism way back when I started watching her about 5 years ago, actually. So I was profoundly influenced by a lot of what she does for narcissism. I didn't think I was going to land in a career quite like this, though. But one thing led to another, so here I am. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a real compliment. And I'd love to have Dr. Ramani on some format in the future. Anyways, back to Heidi's letter. I was with my ex for over 4 years. We're both in our early 50s, for context. We met through a random message on Facebook. We spoke for a month before meeting. It was love at first sight. He was amazing in every way. Funny, kind, attentive, affectionate. We finished each other's thoughts. We had literally everything in common, from music to movies and food. I felt like I met my person finally. We were always literally touching, holding hands, random kisses. There was always a great deal of affection. That never changed. He actively professed his love in notes and sending music with beautiful lyrics, to name a few things. In hindsight, I can see that what I thought was an amazing connection with my soulmate was probably love bombing, but I was eating it up. Before this experience, I'd never heard of love bombing. I just thought he was intensely affectionate and thoughtful. He was everything I ever wanted, and a couple of months in, he abruptly broke up with me out of the literal blue. We'd come off a great weekend together, and he texted me that it was over. Worth the mention, he lives an hour away, so we really only spent long weekends together. I was naturally in shock and disbelief. Somehow we managed to work through that, and things picked up where they left off. I started to get weird feelings of mistrust I couldn't explain. It was as if my spidey senses were telling me something was off. I'd lent him an old phone of mine to use while his was being repaired. When I got that old phone back, I was blindsided by some recent text still attached on that phone. He was texting romantically with an ex-wife, third ex-wife, whom had no children with each other, and he would also message a former love interest. There was maybe a third woman in the picture, but I didn't confirm that one. When I confronted him, he was very apologetic and seemed remorseful, although couldn't really provide me with a reason as to why, after all things had been going so well for us and he seemed genuinely in love with me. In the spirit of time, I will say that the random out of the blue breakups continue to happen 22 times, each time after spending a great time together. I'm starting to get a picture as to what kind of experience this is shaping up to be. And It begins with a B and ends with Boomerang. Back to Heidi. And each time I took him back because I genuinely wanted to believe his apologies and I wanted to believe that the man I loved was capable of change. Side note, I've been in therapy a couple of months now, as I see that my boundaries were grotesquely blurred if I had them at all. And I am also responsible because I know I kept taking him back. He continued, unbeknownst to me, to carry on a long distance emotional affair with the ex-wife. Of course he did, even though he promised me it was over. This is so bad. I discovered he had a Twitter account and he was extremely inappropriate with his comments he made to women, presenting himself as a single man, telling these women how sexy and beautiful they were. I think we're now beginning to come to another consistent behavioral trait, or should I say addiction, that I would basically spell out as sex addiction. But let's keep going. Heidi says, he'd be sharing details and pictures of himself and his life with these women. The women he was commenting on range from young and pretty to old. I literally mean 80 years old women in lingerie. I want to just take a moment here to say no disrespect to 80-year-old women in lingerie. More power to you. But it is not uncommon for sex addicts to be very into a wide range of people that give them a thrill, a rush. And when they start going out of the usual range of people that they're into because they no longer find that same sense of spark and attraction that they do, they start going to other more obscure and at times prohibitive forms of, fantasy, porn, and it can go into like some very restrictive erotic material. So often these people can come in for looking at, pedophilia and other stuff like that as well too. And it's all motivated by their low self-worth and low self-esteem, amongst many other things. It's not okay. Let's continue with what Heidi's saying. I was gobsmacked. It's also worth mentioning he proposed 3 times, each engagement ending in a discard weeks later. He moved back to his home state 900 miles away for a year in the middle of our relationship, only to tell me he was ready to take the next step with us. He sold a home and everything he owned and moved back in with me. 3 weeks after moving in with me, he told me he didn't want us anymore and wanted to move back to the state he just came from. Jesus Christ. That was last summer. He never left state again, but did move out into a place of his own. After a few weeks apart, we rekindled. Often he would become agitated that I wasn't able to forgive and forget his mistakes of the past. I told him I'd forgiven him, but when the same issues kept popping up, like messaging other women or breaking his word, it opened the wound right back up. Let's fast forward to what's happened recently. I found out that he was Facebook friends and had been cheating with one of the women he was actively cheating on with me. He told me it's his way of moving on and got defensive when I questioned him. He told me his feelings toward me had changed and that he didn't love me any longer. Oh, that's just bullshit. That's just his fear of intimacy taking away any romantic feelings. Although the night before he told me he loved me as I left the house. Okay, fearful avoidant. Okay, settle down. He was often uncomfortable and became irritated whenever the topic of conversation went deeper than surface level. I learned to stifle my feelings and not bring up anything so I didn't provoke an argument. One time I brought up something I enjoyed while being intimate with him. I asked playfully if he would do more of that, and he immediately was visibly agitated and barked at me. It sounds like you're complaining. I said I wasn't complaining, just sharing something that he's done in the past that pleases me and asking if that it's something he enjoyed or maybe not. He said he enjoyed it and he would show me. Needless to say, that never happened again. What am I dealing with? He's like Jekyll and Hyde. I've often thought about narcissism, but he's never been verbally abusive to me. I've never feared for my physical safety around him, although I've seen some road rage that made me nervous, but I never spoke up for fear of an argument. I don't even know what questions to ask you, but I need your thoughts on his behavior. When he loves me, I feel like the most loved woman in the world. When the discards begin, it sends me into despair. It's been the biggest heartbreak and disappointment of my life. Excuse me. I feel like I've been so manipulated by someone I loved entirely, and it's been a daily struggle to wrap my head around what the actual fuck has happened for 4 years. I'm truly grateful for any insight you could provide. Yeah, okay. Firstly, I just want to say that I really respect you sharing this with me because this is a disaster and a half. And I am truly sorry that you've gone through this because this is awful. I will say that a breakup of 22 times is, I mean, look, for a fearful avoidant, I want to say that's, the average because I've heard of worse, but it's still way too high for words. Like that's, yes, it's average for like the very dysfunctional end of the boomerang avoidant attachers. And by boomerang, I mean the ones that keep coming back for cycles. Not every avoidant attacher will return to an ex or a loved one, but when they do this and it's this intense, you basically become a junkie. It's pretty bad. Like this is pretty shocking, in fact. So I do want to say I'm terribly sorry to you. It's very relatable, I should say. A lot of people have been through very similar situations. So you want to know what's going on. Okay, so to me, this guy's a sex addict based on what's being shared. Now, I know I've said, even in my disclaimer, I'm not doing diagnoses, but there are some signs here that are at least consistent with sex addiction. The fact that he tends to use Facebook, probably porn, and other sites to connect with women as a way of avoiding intimacy with you suggests he probably has quite a few things going on. Now, this is speculation land, so please buckle in for the ride because I may be completely off the mark. But from what I know of people who are avoidantly attached, who are sex addicts, the basis for this can be that they don't want to be controlled by a woman, yet they constantly seek out women in order to overcome a past trauma that they've had growing up. May have had a narcissistic mum, an overbearing mother, enmeshment. And this is particularly in this instance for a man. If it was for, a gay man or a woman, a lesbian, might be the dad, but it depends where the enmeshment lies. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that part is, down to the context of every situation. But based on this particular story, it seems to me like there's a need to control women in terms of the amount of intimacy that he gives them. And it's consistent that every time you guys get close, he breaks up with you. I don't think this guy's got a narcissistic bone in his body from the context that, as you said, he's not physically violent or verbally aggressive, but I do think he has the capacity to be narcissistic. He lacks the ability to see what he's doing to you at the very least. He's not empathizing with the pain he's causing you. You've just gone through the biggest emotional pain of your life. So to that extent, I'm like, yeah, he's definitely got at the very least some degree of cognitive empathy, but I don't think he's able to show any of it for you. And I suspect he probably knows he's got a significant problem that he's not working on. It's still emotionally abusive. Like, let's not stray far from that. It's just, I don't think it has the same dimensionality of narcissism where there's isolation, chronic gaslighting. There's definitely denial, defensiveness, and him trying to act like none of this is going on with all these women that he's hoarding. Now, hoarding is a term used in sex addiction where we describe a person who basically amasses, say, a bunch of, like if you're a man and you're straight, you amass a bunch of people online who you're interested in by sexting them, like on Snapchat, for instance. You send lots of inappropriate messages when you're already in a relationship. And usually the trigger for this is when you feel pretty shitty about yourself. Here's what I think is happening. Again, speculation land. I suspect that when you guys get close, he freaks out and thinks, what if this all goes wrong? This isn't going to work out. She's going to think I'm terrible for her. And I suspect what happens is his way of coping with these terrible thoughts and feelings is he goes and has probably a lot of sex with other women, emotionally cheats, has all these like moments where he breaks up with you and gets with these women in one form or another. And they're his coping mechanism. That's his drug of choice. That's his way of overcoming a lot of the shame inside of him. And I suspect that he's not a happy boy inside of him whatsoever. In fact, I dare say that despite the kind, attentive, affectionate man you met back in the day, those parts still exist. But I think that upbeat, youthful boy energy is beset by deep, deep shame, the need to control intimacy. And I wouldn't be surprised if he probably has some very misogynistic views towards women. A lot of sex addicts and also severe avoidant attachers usually have either misandry, hatred to men, or misogyny, hatred to women, based on enmeshed backgrounds. But this is pretty bad. Like, this is really, really bad. in terms of how, he's behaved. I want to make it clear that, when you describe in the beginning how you felt like you met my person, there was a great deal of affection. I truly do believe he meant and felt everything with you. And that's also part of the reason why he's kept coming back to you, because I think he enjoys your company and you probably make him feel good. But I often find that for a lot of these severe avoidantly attached people, what they're ultimately looking for is, even if they're not aware of it, in this case, they're looking for a parent to finally accept them for who they are. They want to just be told, you're okay, you can do whatever you want, it's fine. Because many of them were controlled, didn't have much of a choice when they were growing up, were basically enmeshed by a parent, so they lost a lot of their own identity. And now they live out their trauma and basically want people to give them unconditional acceptance for who they are. And it's like, listen, you shouldn't be dating. You should be in therapy, healing, and finding your reparenting there, not going out and being uber romantics and vicariously looking for a parent to accept you for all your crappy behavior that you're displaying now. Many of these people won't change because they just don't feel the urgency to do so. And it's not to say that every avoidant attacher is like this. They're certainly not. But the severe end, many of them honestly get into their own head and think there's no hope, or that, this is just the way that I am. So I really think that, he's in a world of his own misery and he's making things so much worse for everyone. And also his need to keep his exes around in the picture as well, too. Clearly he's left a proverbial, not oasis. He's just left his past is littered with the corpses of his previous relationships, which is terrible. And I also want to say, I wouldn't be surprised if the reason why he's so affectionate in the beginning, coupled with his genuine feelings, I wouldn't be surprised if he's an excellent romancer because of probably how he navigated his relationship with his parents. Usually enmeshed avoidants are phenomenal. Like we're talking 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 daters in the beginning, because they've often learned how to be very good at managing difficult people in their life and being just very good at showing up as the perfect little boy, little girl person for their parent and then their partner as well in the beginning. But they have so much emotional immaturity and arrested development. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share off the back of this. So thank you for sharing this with me. You're right to believe that he has a very Jekyll and Hyde sort of behavior. I think to me, what you're seeing is the little boy energy with boundless enthusiasm and love for you with a greater deal of affection. Then there's that avoidant protective part that gets really irritated, like when he's saying to you, it sounds like you're complaining. I feel like in those moments, he's projecting. I feel like it's a lot of pent-up rage that's probably meant for a parent, not for you. And I feel like a lot of this is just so over the top and unnecessary. In any case, I'm going to round out here and say, you're right to be like, what the actual fuck just happened for 4 years, because it is a head fuck. But it's a head fuck that I am very familiar with, and I have been unraveling with clients now for a while. And it's gotten to a point where it's like, it's the same old story, just told in a little bit of a different light. But you wouldn't be the first person to go through this, and I'm so sorry that you've been through this for this long with this many breakups, because it's shocking. Thank you for submitting your letter. If anyone would like to submit their letter, please know that the submissions will open again next month in October. If you found this episode validating, relatable, and at the very least helpful, please leave it a review. It helps out a lot. And I very much look forward to seeing you all for the next letter reading.